And as of 24 hours ago, not even a top vote getter inside his own Republican conference to be the nominee. Mike Johnson, as you said, also voted to decertify the 2020 election won by Joe Biden. The person who was the nominee as of this time yesterday, Tom Emmer, voted to certify that election. But the conference has pivoted to Mike Johnson, who just ran the table inside a fractious Republican conference, which right now has been defined by bad blood amassed over the past 3 weeks. You watched history. This has never happened before. A speaker's never been voted out by his own party. That's what happened 3 weeks ago with Kevin McCarthy. And you saw them come together on a series of nominees between then and now. Steve Scalise, the majority leader, tried it, didn't get the votes. Jim Jordan, the judiciary chair from Ohio, went to the floor 3 times, couldn't get the votes. Tom Emmer had the nomination for 4 hours and bailed out, couldn't get the votes. Mike Johnson just now got the necessary votes, swept his own party. This typically happens once every 2 years, Major. It's happened nearly 20 times this year, and it has concluded.
We'll give you, our audience, a little bit more on Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Let's look at some of the aspects of his most recent voting record. You can see there he voted against, as Scott McFarland just said, certifying the 2020 presidential election. He voted against legalizing same-sex marriage. He voted against a Ukraine aid package in May of this year, opposed the most recent continuing resolution in September to keep the government opening, and he was part of the legal team that defended former President Trump in the first impeachment hearing and trial in the Senate about issues related to Ukraine. I want to bring in CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa. Robert, that is to say, Mike Johnson has never been a committee chairman. He's never been a subcommittee chairman. He is a backbencher for a House Republican conference that quite clearly and evidently wants a backbencher, someone who is less experienced than those who sought the position and could not secure the votes to hold it.
That's exactly right, Major. And to really understand why Mike Johnson of Louisiana, this Republican most people in the country didn't know about a few minutes ago, is now Speaker of the House in the line of succession to the presidency. Let's look at a picture from last night of Congressman Johnson, now Speaker Johnson, surrounded by his colleagues, because this picture really tells you about why Johnson got this role. Behind Johnson is Elise Stefanik, the conference chair. You have Steve Scalise over his shoulder as well, the majority leader. They're the leadership, but who do you see tightly packed around him? The backbenchers, as Major Garrett just said. It's the backbenchers who elevated him, those congressmen and women who you don't know about. They're looking for someone to break up the leadership, someone new to come in, and someone who echoes former President Trump's politics in many ways. And this is someone who hosts a podcast where he talks about his Christian evangelical values with many members of Congress. He's well known inside the House, not outside the House, and he's someone who's kept a low profile on television, but he's well known as almost a conservative figure rising through the policy ranks in the House. So he has that foundation of relationships, even if he doesn't have the political capital, which is going to be very important, as you know, Major. Facing him right now, real challenges. How to fund support for Ukraine and Israel, as well as government funding.
And just for our audience's benefit, Robert, you know this well. I want you to help them walk through this. He will be the Speaker at the top, the apex of power in the House of Representatives. But all the other Republican superstructure remains. Steve Scalise will still be the majority leader. Tom Emmer will still be the House Majority Whip.
The chair appoints the
meaning those people who sought this position will now be beneath him, and they will have to offer their support, their guidance, their floor capabilities, their legislative capabilities to this newly minted Speaker. So he will be reliant, that is to say, Mike Johnson, on people he's just bested for this coveted position.
And we will see if they can keep a united front, because you now have a new Speaker who believes, certainly based on my conversations with his colleagues over the past 24 hours, that he does have power now, and he wants to use it. Speaker Johnson's already issuing his own letters about his agenda in terms of how he wants to handle appropriations. It's not necessarily the agenda of Majority Leader Scalise, though Scalise, being from Louisiana as well and a mentor, is certainly going to be a right hand to this new Speaker. So will Tom Emmer, the Majority Whip. But what's going to be intriguing to watch and important for the country is how does he handle spending on all of these crucial fronts. This is someone who comes out of the House of Representatives flank that's anti-spending, that wants to restrict abortion rights, that wants to restrict the size of government. And this is someone who is not just kind of a conservative, he's a deep conservative on social issues, cultural issues, economic issues. So you have right now in the United States someone with an ideology from the right wing of the Republican Party assuming the speakership of the House.
Republicans have described this 3-week period as chaotic, a bad look, and now they have a speaker, which means they are a legislatively re-energized body, which means they can now engage with the White House. So I want to go to our senior White House correspondent, Weijia Jiang, who joins us. Weijia, what's the perspective on this development from the White House?
Well, Major, the White House and President Biden have been very careful not to talk about any potential candidates who may become the Speaker of the House, because that wouldn't be in the president's best interest, because he has to work with whoever it is. And in this case, it will be a bit awkward because, as you've been talking about, Congressman Johnson led the charge in the efforts to try to overturn the election that Joe Biden won back in 2020. But they have talked about the urgent need to fill this void because right now President Biden is at the center of the world when it comes to the U.S. foreign policy. And he has been trying to convey that America is back, that allies can count on America, and that America is a leader for all democracies. But at the same time, you have this split screen of the dysfunction of Congress. And it's really fitting and really pretty remarkable timing, Major, that he's actually starting a press conference at this moment with the Prime Minister of Australia, who is here to talk about the security challenges in the Indo-Pacific. And so that prime minister has goals too, namely to get a submarine transfer that requires congressional approval. So all of this, Major, to say that, yes, this is a requirement for the president to move his legislative agenda forward. So there will be relief here at the White House that the Republicans were able to elect someone, even if it is not whoever the president was hoping it would be, although he never publicly said one way or another. Major.
There are busy days in Washington, but this is a particularly busy day. And as Weijia just mentioned, there is a split screen effect worth taking note of. The House of Representatives now propelling itself toward swearing in a new speaker. Meanwhile, just down Pennsylvania Avenue and the Rose Garden of the White House, President Biden with the Australian Prime Minister. Weijia, I want to ask you, has the president said anything in his opening remarks or in engagement with reporters new about the situation in Israel?
Yes, Major. He actually started not by talking about the Prime Minister's visit, but by talking about their united support of Israel. And he reiterated once again Israel's right and obligation to defend itself, but then immediately said that Hamas is not the same, should not be equated with the civilians in Gaza, which is a point that he has in recent days especially been trying to hit home as he tries to free up more humanitarian aid into that region. He said that he has spoken with leaders in the region about the need for more aid, and that he wants this crisis to be over. He has a vision of what's next, and I imagine he will be pressed, Major, about what that could look like, because that's one outstanding question of what Gaza will look like in a post-war world. But right now, he is recommitting again the U.S.'s support of Israel and its right to defend itself. Major.
Weijia Jiang on the North Lawn of the White House. I want to go back very quickly to Scott McFarland on Capitol Hill. Scott, explain to our audience what's happening now, what will transpire in the next couple of minutes or so, and what the House, now that it is reconstituted as a functioning legislative body, will start to work on in the not too distant future.
Two big things. The House has been itching for weeks to formally pass a resolution to denounce the attack on Israel. They couldn't while they were paralyzed. They may do that as a first order of business. But, Major, they've also got to decide on Ukraine funding. House Republicans are bitterly divided on whether to continue spending money on that. Mike Johnson has to unify his party one way or the other, whether to spend billions on Ukraine.
Unified now, we'll see how long that lasts. We expect this new Speaker of the House to be sworn in shortly. That's a formality. That will happen. And later today, Speaker Johnson will hold his first press conference. Our coverage of all that will continue on CBS News streaming. You can find it on your local news, of course, later tonight, and tonight on CBS Evening News. This has been a special report. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Good day.
All right, you've been watching a CBS News special report, and before that, you watched this happen live with us. Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson has now been elected as the next Speaker of the House.
Yes, Johnson, the fourth nominee put forward by the Republicans in 3 weeks. 3 weeks without a House leader and multiple failed rounds of speakership voting.
That's right. Now, at this point, we want to jump over to the White House. As you know, President Biden is there holding a joint news conference with the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. Australia and the United States have stood together for more than a century, and it is indeed a great honour for me to stand alongside my friend President Biden here today. At the heart of our alliance are the enduring values that our people hold in common: a faith in freedom and democracy, a belief in opportunity, a determination to build a more prosperous and more peaceful world. Those values are timeless, and they have never mattered more than right now. That's why the relationship between Australia and the United States has never been more important. And of course, it has never been stronger than it is right now. We work together to promote peace and security across the Indo-Pacific, to uphold the stability which has generated unprecedented economic opportunity for the nations and the people of our region. For Australia, this is about investing in our capability and investing in our relationships. Today, President Biden and I discussed the progress being made on Australia's acquisition of nuclear-powered, conventionally armed submarines, which we announced with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in March in San Diego. We are conscious that this is only the second time in history that the United States has shared this technology. And this fact speaks to the deep trust of our alliance and the significance of the challenge that we face together. Australia appreciates the administration's efforts to operationalise AUKUS and work with Congress to pass the legislation needed to realise our AUKUS ambitions. And I certainly appreciate once again, Mr. President, your call for this legislation to be passed this year. AUKUS will drive innovation and cooperation to provide the United States, Australia and the United Kingdom with improved capability to help secure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. Our cooperation is already unlocking transformative opportunities for jobs and skills and research, from Virginia to South Australia to Western Australia. Australia and the US have a strong and growing partnership in new technology, from medical research to AI. And I join President Biden in welcoming Microsoft's $5 billion additional investment in Australia, which we announced this week here in Washington. The President and I agree that innovation is vital to addressing the environmental challenge of climate change and seizing the economic opportunities of clean energy. The Climate, Critical Minerals and Clean Energy Transformation Compact that we signed in May in Hiroshima is very much central to this. Climate change and clean energy becomes the third pillar of our alliance, alongside our security cooperation through ANZUS and our strong economic ties with the free trade agreement between our nations at its centre. The compact lays the foundation for our two countries to advance climate and clean energy action this decade, both at home and globally. Today we agreed new measures under the compact to support our energy transition, including the establishment of an Australia and US Clean Energy Industry Council comprised of business and public finance leaders to advise government on clean energy industry development and cooperation. We're working closely with the United States to build end-to-end sustainable, reliable and transparent supply chains for critical minerals. Of course, Australia has abundant supplies of these critical minerals that will drive our economies throughout this century: lithium, cobalt, copper, vanadium and rare earths. We want to connect that with American markets, investors and technology in a way that creates new jobs and opportunities for industry and workers in both of our nations. Cheaper, cleaner energy will reduce costs for households, but it will also power a new generation of manufacturing. Our alliance is also delivering for the Indo-Pacific region bilaterally and increasingly with our partners in the Quad. Australia and America are supporting the connectivity of the region, and today we announced the new funding for subsea cables in the Pacific, further support for infrastructure development, including efforts to increase the Pacific's access to financing, and that we'll work together through a new Pacific Banking Forum to ensure that our friends in the Pacific maintain access to the global financial system. Today we also discussed our joint position opposing Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine. Australia stands with Ukraine, and President Biden welcomed the package of further assistance that I announced yesterday. This will provide Ukraine with additional military assistance, utilising the innovative technology that's produced by Australia's defence industry partners. Finally, of course, last night and again today, we spoke about the situation in Israel and Gaza. Australia unequivocally condemns the terrorism of Hamas. We grieve for the loss of every innocent life, whether that be Israeli or Palestinian. In times of crisis, respect for international humanitarian law is paramount. It is a recognition of our common humanity, and I commend the President for his leadership that he has shown in the example that he has set. Today I announced that Australia will provide an additional $15 million in humanitarian assistance for civilians in Gaza. This adds to the $10 million Australia has already committed and will help deliver life-saving assistance such as emergency water and medical services. The friendship between Australia and the United States was forged in hard times. We've served and sacrificed together in the cause of peace. We've helped each other through natural disasters. Australians and Americans share a rich history, but we always have our eye on the future. We're united by a determination to overcome the challenges that we face, and we share an ambition to seize those opportunities which lay ahead of us. Ours is indeed an alliance in which we celebrate what we've achieved up to now, but we focus on the future, a future of great opportunities, one that's stronger because of this alliance.
All right, we're going to take a few questions now. Mr. Garrison, USA Today.
Thank you, Mr. President and Prime Minister Albanese. Welcome to Washington. Mr. President, I want to ask about the conflict, the war in the Middle East. 24 U.S. troops have been injured during 10 drone or rocket attacks on bases in